This ritual was so depraved, so grotesque, that even ancient Rome, known for gladiator blood sports, banned it outright. Yet in Constantinople's Hippodrome, it played out nightly before crowds of 80,000. Children, some as young as 10, were forced into performances that blurred the line between theatre and torture. Coins rained down on their small bodies as trained animals pawed, bit, and pecked at them. To the roaring audience, it was entertainment. In reality, it was organized trafficking on a scale the world had never seen, and from this hellish stage emerged a girl who would one day rule an empire. Her name was Theodora. Theodora's descent began with a death. Her father's, a cassius known as the Bear Keeper, trained massive brown bears for bloody shows in the Hippodrome. It was an official position in the powerful Green faction, one of the two political machines that controlled Constantinople. In 504 CE, the city wasn't just divided by politics. It was split into two massive rival forces, the Blues and Greens. They were far more than sports teams. They controlled jobs, wealth, entertainment, even law enforcement. Your allegiance to one faction dictated your entire life. For Cassius and his family, their place was secure until he died suddenly. By custom, his widow and daughters should have been protected. His position as bearkeeper should have passed to him, securing their survival. But corruption intervened.
Asterius, the Greens' dancing master, who held sway over entertainment jobs, accepted a bribe. Instead of protecting Cassius's family, he handed the position to another man. That single act condemned Theodora, her mother, and her two sisters to a system designed to consume children. Theodora's mother faced a choice no parent should ever face: watch her daughters starve or feed them to the Hippodrome's brutal machine. She chose survival. In a moment of public humiliation, she dressed her three little girls as supplicants, wreaths of laurel around their heads, and paraded them before 80,000 spectators. It is an unspoken advancement. These children were available not for acting or singing, but for services the law itself defined as prostitution. The Greens, whose corruption caused this crisis, turned their backs cold, final rejection. The Blues, rivals of the Greens, took pity. They gave Theodora's stepfather a position, and with that, her fate was sealed. She would never forget which faction abandoned her family, and which showed mercy. It would fuel her revenge for the rest of her life. By the age of 10, Theodora was performing in spectacles so depraved they shocked even Roman audiences hardened by blood and gore. Her specialty became leader and the swan. Naked, she would lie on stage while trained geese pecked barley seeds from her body. To the crowd, it was tutelation. To her, it was survival. Thousands of men threw coins at a child's exposed flesh, but the true horror didn't happen on stage. It happened in the back rooms, where children as young as 8 were forced to provide services to senators, merchants, and aristocrats. Byzantine law explicitly labeled actresses prostitutes, stripping away any distinction. Physical submission wasn't just expected, it was legally mandated. For most children, such abuse broke the spirit, but Theodora was different. She studied it. Night after night, she observed how powerful men, senators, judges, merchants, lost control, dignity, even reason in their lust. What destroyed other children became for her a classroom. The Hippodrome became her university. Each degrading performance taught her lessons in human weakness, desire, and manipulation. She learned that men who believed themselves strong were easily undone by obsession. This was the education that would forge the most dangerous woman in Byzantine history. For 6 years, Theodora endured this system. By 16, she was no longer just another performer. She had become the most requested woman in the Hippodrome, not only for her body, but for her intelligence. The same senators who once tossed coins at her naked form now paid enormous sums for private sessions. They believed they were buying pleasure. In truth, they were feeding a predator who was carefully studying how to destroy them. Then came an opportunity that would elevate her from exploited child to dangerous courtesan. Hykeballus, the Syrian governor of Libya,
visited Constantinople. With him came immense wealth and military authority. When he saw Theodora perform, he didn't want her for a single night. He wanted to possess her entirely. He offered her the role of concubine. For Theodora, it meant freedom from the Hippodrome and a life of luxury. After 6 years of degradation, it seemed like salvation. She accepted. For nearly 4 years, she lived in Hyppolytus's palace in Libya. But this wasn't just luxury. It was graduate-level education in manipulation. Hyppolytus believed he owned her, but Theodora dissected his every weakness. She catalogued which desires shamed him, which fantasies he couldn't resist, which indulgences clouded his judgment. The powerful governor, who commanded armies, became helpless when she controlled his access to pleasure. The dynamic she had seen countless times in the Hippodrome now became her weapon, but she overplayed her hand. She began influencing his political decisions. When he realized her manipulations, his rage was explosive. "Get out, you worthless whore," he screamed, hurling her belongings into the burning sand. After 4 years of power and comfort, she was abandoned, alone, humiliated, and exiled back the world of trafficking. Yet this betrayal became her most important lesson. The journey back across the Mediterranean hardened her into something new. Ship by ship, she sold her body to survive. But now, each man who thought he was using her became another case study. A Roman merchant who paid for conversation. She drew out his trade secrets. A ship captain who offered her free passage. She uncovered his smuggling operations. Every encounter built her database of how male desire could be turned into leverage. By the time she reached Alexandria, she had transformed into something terrifying. Not a victim, but a predator. In Alexandria, she found religion, but not for salvation. She converted to monophysite Christianity under Patriarch Timothy III. This wasn't faith, it was strategy. For the first time, she was building a power base outside the world of exploitation. Then, in Antioch, she met Macedonia, a performer for the blues faction. Macedonia carried rumors back to Constantinople. Rumors that a 40-year-old prince named Justinian had been asking about a woman who survived Libya. Stories had spread of a girl who had endured the Hippodrome, mantled a governor, and survived exile. When her ship approached Constantinople's, Theodora looked upon the golden domes of the city that had once discarded her. But she was no longer the same child. Theodora had been reforged, hardened, weaponized. The city that had once cheered at her humiliation was about to bow to her power. Constantinople, famed for tutti Prince Justinian, heir to the Byzantine throne, attended a court gathering when he first saw Theodora. To him, she was another beautiful former performer. He had no idea he was staring at a woman who had spent 16 years mastering the art of destroying powerful men. The seduction began immediately, but this was no ordinary attraction. This was warfare. Theodora drew on everything she had learned, how to study a man's desires, how to make his weaknesses her weapon, how to turn intimacy into control. She discovered Justinian's need for intelligent conversation, a trick she had perfected with merchants on Mediterranean ships. She uncovered his longing for emotional connection, the same vulnerability she once exploited in Governor Hippodrome. Every private moment with him was calculated. Every whisper, every touch was designed to bind him deeper. Within months, Justinian was enthralled. He believed he was falling in love. In reality, he was being programmed. For Theodora, each encounter was another lesson in how to control a man through desire. For Justinian, each moment pulled him further into dependence. He didn't realize it, but his political judgment was already being clouded by the woman at his side. When he announced his intention to marry her, scandal exploded through the empire. Byzantine law was clear. Once an actress, always an actress. No senator, much less a future emperor, could marry a woman who had performed on stage. The law was designed to keep entertainers permanently excluded from power. The Senate erupted in outrage. You would marry a whore, they sneered. To them, Theodora was unworthy of the throne. But Justinian couldn't let her go. His obsession was too strong. The true obstacle was Empress Euphemia, wife of Emperor Justin. She had risen from slavery to the highest female position in the empire. She knew exactly what Theodora represented, the weaponization of intimacy for political conquest. "I climbed up from slavery," Euphemia declared before the court, her finger stabbing toward Theodora. "But I was never a prostitute." The confrontation was electric. Two women who had clawed their way out of nothingness stood face to face. Euphemia saw the danger. She fought to block the marriage at every turn, forbidding reforms, shutting Theodora out of court, and standing as an immovable wall. Then, one cold night in 523 CE, Euphemia died in her sleep. No warning, no illness, no witnesses. The timing was too perfect. Theodora had once learned from prostitutes which herbs could incapacitate or kill, which poisons left no trace. Whether by coincidence or calculated murder, Euphemia was gone. Within hours of her death, Emperor Justin drafted new legislation. It allowed former actresses to marry men of high rank. The law was so specific, it might as well have been carved with Theodora's name on it. 2 years later, in the Hagia Sophia, Theodora walked down the marble aisle in imperial purple. The same woman who once lay naked on the Hippodrome floor now stood as Justinian's wife and future empress. Every step was Theodora. Every glance was performance. The child who had been sold for coins had turned exploitation into a crown. Their marriage was unlike any in history. Theodora wasn't just Justinian's wife. She became his partner, his obsession, his co-ruler. And then came the test that would reveal just how ruthless she had become. January 52 CE, Constantinople erupted in chaos. For the first time, the blues and the greens, usually bitter enemies, united in rebellion. Their battle cry was simple: Nika, conquer. But their rage wasn't just about taxes or laws. Their fury was aimed at one person, the Empress who had risen from prostitution to power. Death to the horror, they chanted. Fires tore through the city. The Hagia Sophia burned to the ground. The Senate House collapsed in flames. Blood flowed in the streets. Soldiers defected. Even Justinian's bodyguards wavered. The rebels crowned a new emperor, Hypatius, and the empire teetered on the brink of a fall. Inside the palace, Justinian's advisors begged him to flee. Treasury chests were already being loaded onto ships in the harbor. "Save yourself," they pleaded. "Abandon the city. Escape while you can." But to run meant abandoning Theodora. To run meant letting go of the woman who defined his power. Then Theodora rose. Her silk robes rustled as she stood before the terrified council. The air reeked of smoke and fear. Candles flickered in the haze. "My opinion," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "is that this is no time for flight, even though it brings safety." Every eye turned to her. "May I never be separated from this purple. May I never live to see the day when those who meet me do not call me mistress. As for myself, I approve an ancient saying, royalty is a fine burial shroud." Her words froze the room. She had endured beatings, humiliation, and degradation in the Hippodrome. This was nothing new. The mob outside was no different from the men who once screamed for her body. She understood crowds better than anyone alive. And now she used that knowledge to end Justinian's will. The emperor chose massacre over retreat. Her plan was brutally simple. Generals Belisarius and Mundus would trap the rebels in the Hippodrome during the victory celebration. The same arena where Theodora once performed degrading acts would become their graveyard. As 100,000 people packed the stands, soldiers slammed the gates shut. The killing began with chilling precision. Swords slashed through bodies, spears pierced flesh, screams ricochet off stone, walls. Families were cut down where they stood. By the end of the day, 30,000 corpses to the arena floor. Theodora had turned the Hippodrome, the stage of her childhood humiliation, into the site of her ultimate revenge. After the massacre, Justinian restructured his government. In 53-5 CE, a new decree required all governors to swear loyalty not just to him, but to Theodora as well. For the first time in Roman history, a woman stood recognized as co-ruler of the empire. The child who had been forced into prostitution was now master of the men who once bought her from her private chambers. Theodora created what historians call a parallel government. But it was more than that. It was an intelligence network that rivaled anything in history. Trusted eunuchs and women moved through palace corridors, gathering secrets. Who slept with whom, which senators had shameful habits, which officers were vulnerable to blackmail. Theodora turned gossip into weapons. Fear became her currency. In public, she demanded every visitor prostrate themselves and kiss both her feet and Justinian's. It wasn't reverence, it was domination. The humiliation she had once suffered was now reversed with deadly precision. In 57 CE, Pope Silverius refused to support her religious allies. Theodora didn't argue. She destroyed him. Through Belisarius and his wife Antonina, she fabricated treason charges. The Pope was accused of conspiring with the Goths and sent into exile. He died there, eliminated not by theology, but by the same weapon Theodora had used since childhood: fear and manipulation. This was just the beginning. Theodora's next target was even more dangerous: Queen Amalasuntha of the Ostrogoths. Amalasuntha was everything Theodora feared: royalty by birth, natural dignity, and worst of all, an intellectual rival. She had been exchanging letters with Justinian, letters that read less politics and more like flirtation. Theodora recognized the signs, the careful phrasing, the late-night reading, the subtle seduction through ideas. It was her own strategy reflected back at her. She could not allow it. Through the ambassador Peter the Illustrian, she whispered poison into the ear of King Theodahid, Amalasuntha's cousin. Soon after, the queen was murdered while bathing, naked, defenseless, destroyed, and a scene designed for maximum humiliation. Theodora's message was unmistakable. If intimacy could not be controlled, it would be annihilated. Her most brilliant assassination came in 541 CE against John the Cappadocian, Praetorian prefect, and one of the empire's most powerful men. John was dangerous not because of strength, but because he understood manipulation. He was immune to the usual tactics. He saw through her games. So Theodora turned to psychological warfare. For 6 months, John received grotesque gifts: wilted flowers, symbolizing death, tiny daggers hinting at penetration, paintings of executions. Each delivery was designed to unnerve him. Slowly he began to break, losing sleep, jumping at shadows, sweating with paranoia. She was recreating the same torment she had endured as a child in the Hippodrome. But now she was the tormentor. Finally, she sprang her trap. Working with Antonina, Belisarius's wife, and her most trusted ally, Theodora, arranged a fake conspiracy meeting involving John's daughter. Surveillance agents recorded his every word. Caught in treason, John fell from the heights of power to a beggar in Egyptian streets. The lesson was clear. Theodora didn't just destroy enemies, she unmade them. By now, she had mastered the art of government through fear. Her private chambers became a shadow court where secrets were traded like currency. Every senator, every general, every bishop knew. The Empress held files on them: their desires, their affairs, their weaknesses. She had the means to destroy anyone. This was the empire she built, one where manipulation was law and humiliation was policy. But Theodora's most lasting power wasn't in assassinations, it was in legislation. Together with Justinian, she reshaped Roman law in ways that still echo today. Her fingerprints are on the corpus. Jurists, civilists, the foundation of Western legal tradition. Her reforms read like the vengeance of someone who had survived the darkest abuses. She outlawed forced prostitution. She ordered brothels closed if they prevented women from leaving. She made rape punishable by death, regardless of social rank. She expanded divorce rights for women. She ensured rapists' property was transferred to their victims. Each law wasn't just justice, it was retribution. She was coding her pain into the very fabric of the empire. And yet, Her reforms also revealed her darker side. She established the Metanoia convent where former prostitutes were forced into religious life. She controlled their bodies the same way hers had once been controlled, ensuring their choices remained hers to dictate. Even in liberation, she demanded domination. Theodora also mastered dynastic politics. She arranged marriages, broke alliances, punished families who defied her. She understood that bloodlines could be manipulated the same way men could. Every union was a chess move. Every child was a piece in her design to keep her influence alive long after her death, June 28, 548 CE. Theodora died at the age of 44, likely of cancer. Her death shattered Justinian, the emperor who had once commanded armies, restructured laws and ruled the world's greatest city, collapsed into despair. He never remarried. He never recovered. For 17 more years, he sat the throne, but the fire was gone. His rule without her was weak, hollow, ineffective. The woman who had controlled him in life controlled him in death. The greatest evidence of her influence is what happened afterward. During her life, Justinian had passed sweeping reforms, crushed rebellions, and expanded the empire's power. After her death, little significant legislation emerged. The brilliance of his reign had not been his alone, it had been their partnership. When she was gone, the empire drifted. In Ravenna's Basilica of San Vitale, a mosaic still shows her in dazzling robes, larger than the other figures. She wears imperial purple embroidered with images of the Magi bringing gifts to Christ. It was her final act of theatre, the trafficked child turned prostitute turned empress, now immortalized as holy, equal to biblical royalty. From the Hippodrome floor to the throne of Rome, she had rewritten her story in stone. Today, tourists walk through the Hippodrome where the Theodora once lay naked for coins. They pose for pictures on stones where 30,000 rebels were slaughtered at her command. They gaze at mosaics depicting her as divine. Few understand the brutal truth. The girl who was once sold for entertainment became the most dangerous woman in Roman history. She proved that barbaric practices don't only create victims, they can forge predators who use trauma as a weapon. Her reign was built on the psychology of abuse. Her empire was governed by the lessons of exploitation, and her legacy reminds us that the line between victim and destroyer can be terrifyingly thin. Theodora's story is a warning. Childhood suffering doesn't just break people. Sometimes it creates monsters capable of breaking empires. Subscribe Echoes of Torture to discover more stories of how childhood trauma reshaped the course of history.